Hey everyone, thanks for clicking on this video. So, obviously there's a reason why you're here. Kingdom Hearts plot is extremely convoluted, and this is no exception. With Union Cross just coming out, we got a whole dump load of just story content for the Kingdom Hearts series and what the future is going to hold. And one of the most important things that we got out of that update was the Master of Masters actually diving deep into his plan against the darkness. And obviously the way that Kingdom Hearts is, it's pretty common for it to actually get convoluted or just confusing in general for people to understand. Me personally, I think I was able to get this down pretty quickly and I think I understand it, so I'm going to try and help you guys understand so that you can just see the scope of how crazy and brilliant this motherfucker is in making this plan. And how brilliant Nomura is, really, is what I'm trying to say. In order to understand this person's plan, we actually have to date back to when he was a child. In one of the cutscenes in Union Cross, he described how when he was a kid, the Keyblade War was still going on. So the Keyblade War wasn't just Birth by Sleep, back cover, which was the original Keyblade War, the second Keyblade War that happened in the Data world after Daybreak Town originally got plunged into darkness, I think. Still a little bit confused on that part. And then the Keyblade War in Kingdom Hearts 3. They were different Keyblade Wars, but the Keyblade War is an everlasting battle between light and darkness, so it never ends, which means it has never ended from the beginning. And there was an original Keyblade War. We don't really have any word as to if there was a Keyblade War before this one, but when the Master of Masters was a kid, there was a Keyblade War that he was taking part of as a kid. And he described that in the same way in the beginning there were 13 darknesses originally. Now I do want to mention before I go a little bit deeper into this part is that at one point in Union Cross, the Master of Masters encountered or spoke to one of the darknesses. You see, in the battle of light and darkness when the Master of Masters was a kid, the darkness, in order to win against the light, they had to cast off their bodily form. So they actually had form. Now darkness is formless. And what I'm getting to is that in a different scene, when the darkness was speaking to Luciu, one of those 13 darknesses, he described the Master of Masters as straight light. He just said, "We don't like light either." So that leads me to believe that in the beginning times, when the Master of Masters was a kid, he might have been some kind of entity of light, the same way that darkness was an entity of sorts, but had form. In order to win their battle with the light, they chose to cast off their form in order to win. But in doing so, that made it so that they weren't one, and they were separated. They weren't a whole anymore. Therefore, their will kind of diminishes over time, and it's almost like they each have their own individual wills, although they do claim that they are still a part of a whole. So, with this being said, the Master of Masters has a very interesting plan. After the Keyblade War that he took part in, there were 13 separate darknesses that all had an individual will and weren't a part of a whole anymore. So what he thought would be best to do in order to actually win a battle against this darkness, because he wouldn't be able to win a fight against darkness if it has no form. If it has no form, then darkness cannot be defeated. So in order to make it so that darkness can be defeated, he raised his disciples, the masters that we know from Kingdom Hearts back cover and Union Cross and all that series of games, including Luciu, so that's 6, a total of 7. The Master of Masters, Luciu, Envy, Ava, Aced, Gula, and Ida. From there, he would raise his disciples so that they would be pure of heart. They wouldn't have a hint of darkness inside of their hearts. That's why they were acting the way that they were acting in Kingdom Hearts back cover. That's something that's explained to me now. They were just so pure of heart that there was no doubt inside of their hearts. No anger, no rage. But the thing is that that will always be there. Darkness will always cast itself as a shadow if there is light. But they were pure, because that's how the Master of Masters raised them to be. So what he would do in order to defeat the 13 darknesses that he's faced up against for what seems to be centuries at this point, his plan is to put each of these darknesses in a person who has a pure heart, so that the darkness can reside within this person but not actually possess them, because they would be so pure of heart that the darkness wouldn't be able to actually overtake their hearts. So they would still be themselves while having this darkness inside them, this very strong pure darkness, and they would hold on to this darkness inside of them until they are defeated. And that is the end goal. He wants to put all of these darknesses inside of a person with a pure heart, so that they can then get defeated by someone, most likely Sora or someone, and that would extinguish the darkness themselves. The darkness would be defeated because it had form inside of another person's body. But that would obviously mean that the person who is in control, that person with their own heart, they also have to be defeated. Their life has to end in order for the darkness to actually be destroyed. Now let's go over the details of his plan. I wanted to give you the grandiose scale of it all. The people that he chose, so it kind of splits up. With this new Union Cross story, it does kind of branch off, because with Ava's decision to give the book to someone other than the Master of Masters wanted her to initially, and he ended up giving it to that person anyways, Ava attempted to change the future, and this actually did happen. Now, of course, she changed the future, but it did not cause a paradox, because the events in the book still happened, and that's just how it is. But Ava changed the future, and I do believe that her changing the future caused kind of a ripple in a timeline that caused other changes. And what changes that I'm talking about is how some of these darknesses actually got sealed, because the Master of Masters' plan was he wanted to have 7 of those darknesses initially to be put inside of himself along with his disciples. So that's 7 darknesses that are inside of their hearts, their bodies, and now have form, but cannot possess them because they are pure of heart. So that's 7. And then another 5 would go into the Union leaders that they chose after their passing. So me saying that, I do want to confirm that I believe what he's saying is 5 of those darknesses have been defeated. At least that's what I'm interpreting from him. After the initial Keyblade War back cover, our foretellers that we know of, they all died in that Keyblade War. If that's the case, then 5 of those darknesses have been extinguished entirely, while 1 still resides inside of Master of Masters, which I'll get to that in a moment, where he resides, and 1 resides inside of Lushu. He wanted the next 5 to be possessed into the Union leaders that were chosen after them. However, that actually didn't come to fruition because of the timeline being changed. And what ended up happening was Ephemir and the player that we played as made a plan so that he would act like he was possessed by darkness, but he actually wasn't, so that he could actually trick darkness into being sealed in a room and be trapped in there forever. So these 5 darknesses were supposed to possess other people, all of our Union leaders, except Strelitzia was not actually a Union leader. She never became one because she was defeated beforehand, and that's because one of those darknesses didn't actually possess one of the Union leaders, it possessed Ventus instead. And he wasn't pure of heart, so he was able to be taken over easily. And I think that's where it comes from as to how Ventus has this problem with darkness, is that at the time he wasn't pure of heart because he wasn't that chosen person that the Master of Masters knew was pure of heart, which was Strelitzia. It was Ventus that actually got taken over instead. Anyways, I digress. So there's 4 more darknesses, and they all appear in the Union Cross finale, and it's an amazing scene. The player acts like he's possessed, and when he's fighting Ephemir and Scold, Ephemir shoots him in the chest with a portal, and this world ends up being the pipeline that is featured in Union Cross that kind of leads to digital worlds. That's not really important, but it's just a pathway. Think of it as the room in Kingdom Hearts 2 where you went from the Data Twilight Town to the world that never was. It was kind of like a pathway like that. It's a linear path, but if the doors are locked from both sides, you can't get out, and you're trapped in there forever. And that was their plan. So these four darknesses that were supposed to be possessing our Union leaders, who ended up being Scold, Ephemir, Larium, and Brain. None of them got possessed, and instead these darknesses were trapped in that pipeline. Ephemir locked the door from the outside when he shot the player through the chest, and it sucked in all the darknesses, including player. And then the player got up and revealed that he wasn't actually possessed by them. So he then locked the door from the inside, and the darknesses couldn't get out. They're trapped forever. And that leaves us with one final darkness. Now, it is really hard to say what happens to this darkness, because that is the one part that is kind of just left out in the open. That part hasn't been explained, but it is supposed to possess someone. And the Master of Masters does clearly say that that only just leaves us with one, and then he kind of just leaves it there. At this point, I want to kind of speculate a little bit. So, up to this point, I appreciate you guys actually staying here and getting the explanation. That was his plan from the beginning. The plan was to have all 13 darkness entities possess a person with pure heart so that they can then be defeated in form. Now, that does pose a problem, I guess, for the fact that there being 4 darknesses that are trapped and not necessarily defeated, but I guess it could be a good technicality because they are isolated from the other side. They're isolated from the world. They just can't get out. They're trapped forever. There's no way for them to get out. So I would like to think that it is kind of the same thing, but only time can tell. Now, let's just go over one more time who exactly is possessed at this moment in our original Kingdom Hearts timeline, the original games. So, one of them was Ventus, but we defeated his darkness at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3. And we got that confirmation when we were facing up against Vanitas as a Seeker of Darkness. He confirmed that he is darkness, and that is it. That's all he is. That's all he has ever been. There's no way for him to be anything else because that is what he is. Darkness. The other one would be inside Luxu. And now the thing is that Luxu has been defeated on several occasions from what we know. So at this point, he may not even have the darkness inside him anymore. He's been turned into a nobody twice at this point, and he's come back as a regular person in the vessel that he is currently in at that time, Braig, or Xigbar. But he has been defeated on several occasions, and who knows how many times he's been defeated in whatever vessels he's had in the past. So it is possible that the darkness has already been alleviated from him, but it's hard to say at this point. Another one is the Master of Masters. We don't know how exactly he met his demise, but we do know that he is in the world of unreality, the world of fiction. He implied it in the Kingdom Hearts Union Cross ending, right on his last scene, that he was going to go somewhere where light or darkness can neither reach, because it's not even a concept in that world, because it's a world of fiction. When he was speaking to the darkness about this, the darkness misinterpreted it for the data world, because it's something that is not tangible. But the Master of Masters was clearly telling him that regardless of how you think about it, it's not something that you can even think about. It's not something that's it's not your level of comprehension, this world that I'm talking about, because it's a world of unreality. But I think the reason why the darkness can't is because it itself is an entity. Now, I believe that does kind of make a retcon for my previous speculation, where the Master of Masters himself is an entity of light. But my thing is that I wonder if he gave himself form. What if in the past darkness had form, but they were, they don't look like humans, they're just humanoid or something of that sort. They had form. What if light didn't have form, and the Master of Masters, as a final move or something of that sort, he gave himself form, possibly, kind of nerfing himself. So that's the Master's plan. And he still has a darkness inside him, except he's in Quadratum. That's where he's at. But it is shown in the Union Cross story, not necessarily in the final update, that he does plan to return. Lucio is the person with the memories, and his Keyblade itself is the medium that he gave Lucio at the very beginning of all this time. So it's really hard to say whether or not the Master of Masters will come back at that moment of the epilogue in Kingdom Hearts 3, because now they are both together again, and because they have all the other foretellers except Ava in their presence. But what we do know is that those two darknesses are still alive. Now, I did want to speculate on that fourth final darkness that actually hasn't been confirmed who he possessed yet. I'm actually going to stop the video here at this point because I believe that the video might be getting a little bit long with this explanation. I do have a theory as to what happened to the final darkness that we were shown in the ending of Union Cross, because there were two parts, so I guess it would still be technically the ending. We saw the darkness face up against Lucio at the very end of that scene with the both of them. So I have a theory as to what happened to that final piece of darkness, while we know that the other two dark entities that are possessing both Lucio and the Master of Masters. The one who was inside Ventus was defeated, and his name was Vanitas. But there is still one more, and we're not even sure who that one possessed, because it has to be possessed by someone and defeated in order for him to be extinguished in its entirety. So I have a theory about that, and I do recommend you guys go and watch that video. I'm probably going to work on quite a few of these videos today. I'm just going to bust them all out at this point. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the explanation, and I hope I made it as simple as possible for you. But in order to make it simple, it had to be a little bit long. Other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did enjoy it, and subscribe if you're not already. And of course, if you guys interpreted his plan entirely differently, or if you have any other theories or, anything that you want to say, write it down in the comments. I want to see what you guys say, because this ending was absolutely phenomenal. So I do want to see how everyone else interprets this ending. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video.